Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Dr. Joan Durrant, a child psychologist, researcher, and a global leader in the movement to end corporal punishment. Her work spans across continents, cultures, and decades in developing the positive discipline and everyday parenting program that's changing how parents raise children around the world. It's such an honor to meet you today.
Oh, it's lovely to meet you, Ulysses, and it's an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
So you are the director of this organization called Positive Discipline in Everyday Life. Could you explain for the people what this organization is about and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'll maybe go back a few steps. And I'm a developmental psychologist, and I was an academic for over 30 years at the University of Manitoba, here where I am in Canada. And along the way, I created a program to help parents move away from punishment, physical punishment in particular, but also emotional kinds of punishments. And that program took off and really grew. And so I established an organization to coordinate it. And I retired from my academic work to focus full time on implementing the program. We're a not-for-profit organization. The program is offered to parents at no cost, and it's a completely no-profit enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. You also wrote a book called Positive Discipline in Everyday Parenting. And one thing that you wrote was discipline means to teach and not to punish. And I want to ask you kind of what this means, but also why is that distinction so important for parents and educators to understand?
Yes, the word discipline has a lot of connotations. And for many people around the world, it means punishment. And it's come to mean that over centuries. And in some places, it's even, it means like military kinds of punishments and harsh punishments. But actually, if you think about it, the word disciple comes from the same root. And the disciples followed a wise teacher, not someone who hurt them emotionally or physically. And so the word really means to guide, to teach, and we interpret it and kind of reclaim it to mean using our adult experience, the wisdom we've gained through our lives, and to use that to be a mentor to children who are brand new learners. They come into the world without knowing anything at all. And so it's our job and privilege really to be in a position to teach them about how things work, how the world works, how why it rains and why we do things a certain way, and why all the things that happen around them happen. And so we need to sort of see ourselves as being in a position of privilege to have that role in their lives. So instead of harming them when they don't understand or they make a mistake, we're in a position to support their learning, to help them understand, to give them information, and to ensure that they feel safe to learn.
Mhm. In your book, you also highlight that toddlers aren't being bad, they're exploring. And also, as someone who has a 3-year-old sister, I definitely also want to understand more. So how can, parents better understand and respond to behaviors like tantrums and, like you have toddlers throwing tantrums and kind of being defiant towards parents?
Yeah, I think that discipline has kind of taken on this meaning of punishment linked to this idea that when children are doing what they're doing, if they're doing something that we don't want them to do, we interpret it as defying us. We take it personally. It's like they're doing it to me. They're testing me. They're not obeying me. They're defying me. And when we think about their behavior that way, we tend to get frustrated and angry, and we tend to punish them to teach them who's in charge.
Yeah.
When we look at it from a developmental point of view, we see it very, very differently. So if we think again about a child coming into the world with no knowledge, they don't know about money, value, breaking, damage. They don't know about their own emotions, and they don't know about our emotions. And to think that a toddler is doing something to make me angry is really really, yeah, because they don't have that capacity. They don't have the cognitive capacity to put themselves in another person's situation and think what they're thinking. So they're not even capable of doing the things that we attribute to them. What they're generally doing is trying to learn about their world.
Yeah.
So when they touch things that could break, it's not because they want to, they know it's valuable to me, so they want to break it.
Mhm.
That's not what's in their heads at all.
Yeah.
They're interested. So, I've done this with a lot of groups is I've brought in objects that they've never seen before. So,
Mhm.
for example, I was in Indonesia and I brought earmuffs,
Yeah.
which they had never seen before. And
Mhm.
I asked them to figure out what this is for. The first thing they do is pick them up, touch them, turn them around,
Yeah.
feel them. It's the first thing they do. When we don't have conceptual knowledge, we learn through touch.
I see.
And that's what
Mhm.
children are doing.
Yeah.
So they touch it, they throw it, they roll it, they taste it, they smell it, they use their senses. And this is how they learn. So it's our job while they're doing that to make sure their environment is safe.
Mhm.
So, in terms of exploring, that's their job. And if we nurture that, they'll always be curious. They'll always want to learn. But if we shut them down and we hurt them when they do that, they're not gonna, we're shutting down their curiosity, and we're telling them that's bad to be curious. And so if you think about this in the long term, it's probably not the long-term outcome that we want.
Yeah.
So we need to ensure that they're safe to explore while they're learning. And in terms of tantrums, they don't know their own feelings. For them, it's like being
Yeah.
overtaken by a storm. And they little children are always being frustrated. We're
Yeah.
always telling them, no, 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 don't touch, don't do that, don't say that, don't behave that way, don't do this, don't do that. And at some point, they just can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
they get taken over because they don't yet have the capacity to express how they're feeling. And if they're getting punished, they're also on top of that
Mhm.
afraid to try to express how they're feeling because they don't know what they're going to get punished for.
Mhm.
So it all kind of gets bottled up inside, and it happens to all of us. It happens to adults, for
Mhm. Yeah.
heaven's sake. How do
Mhm.
we explain road rage? How do we explain all the violence that we see between adults?
Mhm.
A lot of that is due to the fact that as little children, we weren't allowed to express our feelings. And so we didn't learn how to do it constructively. We learned how to bottle it up,
Mhm.
and then it explodes.
Yeah.
So
So it
when,
seems, sorry. So
so
it seems
go ahead.
that like parents kind of misinterpret this normal development behavior as a negative thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we do it all the time as humans. It's attribution. We attribute causes to things to help us try to make sense of things. So for example, if I'm walking down a hallway and I trip over somebody's foot and I fall and I drop everything,
Yeah.
I will make an attribution for that, whether I'm conscious of it or not.
Mhm.
And I might say, you did that on purpose.
Mhm.
What a terrible person. You did that to me on
Yeah.
purpose.
Mhm.
Or I might say, oh, my goodness, I'm so clumsy. I didn't notice.
I
Or
see.
I trip over everything. Or I might say, oh, that was a complete accident. It was just bad timing. You moved and I moved at the same time, and bang, nobody's
Yeah.
fault.
Mhm.
And we all will do this. And we think we're right. We're very convinced that we're right
Yeah.
when we're making those attributions. And a lot of the time, probably most of the time, we're wrong.
Yeah.
And we only will know what really lay behind it if we communicate.
Mhm.
And if we say, oh, wow, what happened here? And that other person might say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you coming. And then we say, okay, now I understand what happened.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
there's no anger and there's no fighting and there's no hitting. So we do this with children all the time. And in fact, probably a lot more because young ones don't have the language and they don't have the understanding yet to, get out of the way when we're coming, for example, or, thousands of things every day. They just don't have the knowledge. So when we attribute it instead of to lack of knowledge or to the need to explore, to understand their environment, to master challenges, to learn how things work, we interpret it as being against us. You
Mhm.
stuck your foot out on purpose to get me,
Yeah.
then going to respond with punishment. So what we try to do in our program is help parents understand development, how children's brains develop, how their emotions develop, their language, their behavior from birth right through adolescence. And what we try to help them see is that there are certain innate human drives that are with us from day one
Yeah.
to the end of our lives. The drive to understand, the drive for knowledge, the drive to master challenges.
Mhm.
So when, a classic example is a little baby dropping food from their high chair. And
Yeah.
a lot of little babies get punished for that. They get slapped, they have their food taken away, they are told that they're bad. This is universal.
Yeah.
Every baby does this. And
Mhm.
why? Because they're little scientists. They're learning. That's their first lesson in gravity.
Yeah.
And then they'll try a balloon and they'll see it goes up. The corn goes down, the balloon goes up, the ball
Yeah.
bounces, the corn doesn't. They're learning. They're learning how things work. But if we see that as bad and punish it, we stop that process of learning. When you think about it, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
somehow we've gotten this attribution embedded in us that they're doing it on purpose to make us mad, to make a mess, you
Yeah.
know. And it's not what it's about at all.
Mhm.
And we have this wonderful opportunity to help them learn, to help them do those experiments. Let's try
Yeah.
work. Let's
Mhm.
try a cookie. Let's try, water. Let's see what happens. Or we can say, stop that, it's bad. And those two reactions will lead that child and that relationship in two very different directions.
So, what are some practical ways parents can provide this structure without relying on threats and punishment?
Well, it can take some time to really do that. If our habit is to punish, if our habit is to say, if you keep doing that, I'm going to do this to you or slap them or whatever, it's hard to change that attribution. And
Yeah.
what we try to do is help parents understand what's actually going on in the child's brain. What is actually happening here? That's a big piece of it. Once we understand that, we respond really differently. We see it through different lenses, right? It's like putting on a different pair of glasses and seeing it through through another perspective. So that's a big piece of it. But then once we understand that, then we can see much like it's not difficult actually to see how we can respond with what we call warmth and structure. And warmth is just ensuring the child is safe so that they know that you're a safe person, their home is safe, they're
Yeah.
not going to be hurt emotionally or physically, which means they're safe to learn, they're safe to discover, they're safe to explore, and they're safe to master challenges. At the same time, that doesn't mean just, okay,
Mhm.
I'm going out, I'm taking the keys, do what you want.
Yeah.
We are the wise ones that need to guide them and make sure that they are physically safe, not just from us, but from other harms. So when they're in that exploratory phase, make sure all the poisons are out of the way and anything that can harm them is moved away to someplace that they can't reach. But also guiding it so that if a child is grabs a knife and wants to see
Yeah.
how that works when they drop it, we say let's
Yeah.
here's what a knife is for and here's what it can do. We explain why it's a dangerous thing and where should we put it, where can we put it so that nobody gets hurt, and what could we try instead.
Mhm.
Let's try these plastic cups, let's see what
Mhm.
happens with them. So let's make sure that we have safe toys and objects for you to play with. And then the child learns from that, they start to learn a little something about danger. They start to learn the concept of sharp.
Yeah.
They start to learn the concept of pain. But, until they have actually fallen off their tricycle, they might not really understand what that means. We have to keep them safe. It's our responsibility to make sure that their environment is safe. But in doing so, they can learn and
Yeah.
they can problem solve with us. So, oh, I touched that knife and it cut me. See,
Yeah.
here's a cut and that really hurt. So that's not a toy. What could we do so that neither of us gets hurt? And they'll probably say, put it up there where I
Yeah.
can't reach it.
Yeah.
Through all of these experiences that are little everyday moment to moment things, they can learn how to problem solve. They can learn how to start to keep themselves safe, to keep others safe, to understand that the importance of that. If they've had a tantrum, we can make sure that they feel safe. Very important because they're terrified when they're going
Yeah.
through that. It's really scary because they be like, wow, they have no idea what's going on inside of them. And so if we stay safe, make sure they know they're safe, stay close. And then when that storm has passed, we can talk to them about feelings. They can start to learn about feelings. They can start to empathize. Oh, that happened to me one time and it was really a scary feeling and I didn't know if it was ever going to end. Is that how it felt?
Yeah.
And you know what that was? I was really feeling frustrated. And we feel frustrated when we want to do something and we can't do it. So, how could, here's some ideas about how I handle frustration. How could you handle frustration? What could we do next time? Breathe, I breathe deeply and take deep breaths, and that helps me feel calmer. Everything's an opportunity for
Yeah.
learning. Everything's an opportunity for learning about not only themselves, but other people as well. They learn empathy when we show empathy. They learn perspective taking when we tell them what our perspective is in a kind and respectful way. So, structure is about communication, it's about engaging the child in problem solving, seeing, what could we do differently next time? Here are some ideas I've got. What are your ideas? Would this work, do you think? What would work for you? And this is true from the time they're little to adolescence. And if you think about it, if we do this with them through all those years, by the time they're teenagers and we're not around to help them figure out much bigger problems than eating Play-Doh, right?
Yeah.
They're tempted by a lot of other things and they have such pressures on them.
Mhm.
If we've taught them those skills of identifying their feelings, figuring out what's actually going on here, what might that other person be thinking? And how can I solve this problem? What will work in this situation?
Yeah.
We've really given them important skills for getting through that period when they're sort of between adulthood and childhood. And a lot of kids really struggle at that time, often because we've shut down that process early on.
Yeah. So, if a child does face corporal punishment in their childhood, what are some long term effects of physical discipline on a child's development and mental health?
Well, every child is different. Every child is an individual. And so the way each child will respond will be, you know, theirs.
Yeah.
But what we know from population level studies is that over time, corporal punishment produces only negative long term outcomes.
Mhm.
So, what happens with corporal punishment is that let's say the child is, heading toward the electrical outlet, ready to
Mhm.
stick their finger in.
Mhm.
The parent is, kind of
Yeah.
panics in that moment, runs over and almost impulsively, instinctively slaps the child's hand at some level, thinking if I do that, it'll protect them. They won't do it again. But what happens over time when that happens again? So then they touch the vase and they get slapped. And of course, it takes a lot of repetition
Yeah.
Sadly, it takes a lot of repetition because the child doesn't really understand why. They just know, oh, I'm going to get hurt, but it's kind of random from their perspective.
Mhm.
So they're going to start closing in. They're going to stop touching and exploring and doing those things that are so important for their brain development. And what we see is that they start distancing themselves from that parent. So, what the parent might not be thinking is that I'm associating my voice, my face, my being
Yeah.
with pain and fear. And when that happens, it can really start to erode the relationship.
Mhm.
So the child starts avoiding. So the parent actually has less opportunities to teach the child. The child's brain development is being impaired because they're not doing the exploration that's absolutely necessary for their brains to develop, in a really complex, healthy way. And so what we see over time are things like slowing cognitive development,
Yeah.
weaker parent-child relationships, weaker trust, mental health issues like anxiety
Yeah.
and depression because it's an uncontrollable pain,
Mhm.
and that can lead to depression, fear of their parents, which is the last thing parents really want. Like
Yeah.
that's not what they're after. They think they're keeping the child safe, but the way to keep a child safe when you've got plugs is to plug them.
Yeah.
So these cheap little dollar store devices that you
Mhm.
plug into your outlets to prevent that, to keep the child safe, which is really what you want,
Yeah.
without all those negative side effects of the fear and the anxiety and the relationship issues and the cognitive issues. And what we also know is that when children see, okay, every time a parent hits a child, they're losing an opportunity. They're at the same time they're providing a model of hitting in to solve a problem, hitting someone you love and someone who's smaller and weaker than you to get them to do what you want them to do, which isn't, like, when you think about it, it's
Yeah.
not a model that we want to be providing for children. And at the same time, that moment now is lost as an opportunity to teach a child something and to strengthen your relationship and to build your trust.
Mhm.
So instead of slapping, talking.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't touch that. Do you know why? And so, when my son was little, we sat down. There were things that he just know he really
Yeah.
wanted to touch, right? Like little a
Yeah.
China Mickey Mouse in a China car. Like, oh my God, like what could be more tempting than
Yeah.
that? So when he got more sort of fine motor control, we would sit down and talk about this little thing and why it meant so much to me.
Yeah.
This is a treasure for me, and it can break. So if we drop it, it can break, and then I'll be so sad.
Yeah.
So, but I'd like you to be able to play with it.
Yeah.
But when it's something's really special and breakable, here's how we hold it.
Yeah.
And we sat down and we practiced holding it gently and treating it like a treasure. This is how we treat a treasure. Instead of hurting him and making him afraid of that, afraid of me, kind of instead, where's the opportunity to learn? There's always an opportunity for the child to learn, not just to learn to obey us,
Mhm.
but to learn something that's going to be helpful to them going
Yeah.
forward. So we give them information, we guide them, we model, we scaffold their learning. So this is a concept that I think is so helpful for parents to think about. All of us are learning all the time.
Yeah.
So we're at some level of learning. For me, astrophysics, I'm like zero. Psychology, I'm up here somewhere, but I'm
Yeah.
still learning. So if you want to teach me something about astrophysics, you're going to have to start from scratch
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
teach me the basic concepts that I can build on. And then once I understand those, you can introduce something new. And then once I understand that, you can introduce something new. And we build like a ladder.
Yeah.
So with psychology, I've got this whole foundation of concepts and terms and theories and so now, but I can still learn a lot, but I've got a lot more to build on. So I
Yeah.
can take in more kind of complex concepts. But astrophysics, got to start simple.
Yeah.
And so it's a scaffolding process. And if we can see, and kind of get a sense of what the child understands now, then we can introduce something to help them understand that a little bit more and a little bit more. And this is how we build skills. Usually when children are having, meltdowns or, doing things that are pushing our stress response up to the top, it's because they need more understanding of self-regulation, of how our emotions operate, or, how anxiety affects us, how excitement, how lack of food, how lack
Yeah.
of sleep affects us. And if we help them understand that, like in our family, we used to say if somebody was kind of getting edgy, we said, "Uh-oh, low blood sugar, let's eat." And it was always the
Yeah.
case. If we
Yeah.
sat down and had something to eat or drink, everything was fine.
Yeah.
And that helped everybody understand themselves, and it helped our child understand how I feel like up here is affected by what's going on in my body. And so it helped him become more aware of how that all works together. And instead of saying,
Yeah.
"Ah," that he'd say, "Oh, I better have something to eat, a time for a snack." Like
Yeah.
it's helpful. It's so
Yeah.
helpful. I think what stops a lot of parents from, ending the hitting and the threatening and all of that is that they're afraid they're going to spoil the child.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think if we think about what does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
what is spoiling? It's not learning. It's the opposite of learning. It's sort of feeling like, I don't know. If someone treats me with respect and kindness,
Yeah. Mhm.
it's not going to spoil
No
me.
spoil. Yeah.
It's going to strengthen my relationship. It's going to deepen my love and trust, and it's going to make me want to preserve that. There was one time my colleague and I were doing a training, and I didn't get the memo that we were supposed to bring our own lunch.
Mhm.
So I had no food.
Yeah.
So she could have said, "Well, today you go without lunch, so tomorrow you'll remember."
Yeah.
But no, she said, "Here, have half of mine." And the next day, she brought a lunch for me, and I will never forget that. And I didn't think, I didn't. What didn't happen was this sense that, oh, I everybody takes care of me and I get everything I want and I don't have to do anything for myself.
Yeah.
What the effect of that was love for this
Yeah.
person who is so empathic and understanding and helpful and supportive and showed me how much she cared
Mhm. Yeah.
that I was okay.
Mhm.
And the next day, I brought treats for her.
Yeah.
I wanted to repay her. I wanted to show her that I'm part of this cooperative, mutually
Mhm.
supportive, mutually caring relationship. And I want to keep that. And I want to show you how much it means to me. If we just think about ourselves and how respect, kindness, and caring affect us in our relationships,
Mhm.
it doesn't take much to imagine how it might affect a child
Yeah.
who has
Mhm.
only us.
Yeah.
So, I can get that support from other places, right? So if somebody
Yeah.
treats me badly, I've got a sanctuary I can go to, but a child doesn't. We are their
Yeah.
sanctuary. We are the place where they get refueled with a sense of, I'm a good person. I'm loved. I can trust the world and the people around me. And I have people I can go to who are always there for me, who won't hurt me. Those are the people who won't hurt me. So if somebody's bullying me at school, if somebody's, if a a teacher, gives me a bad grade, if, whatever, I lose my job, or whatever it is through life, I know I can go back there to get refueled with that feeling that I'm okay. I am a good person. I am lovable. And I have people I trust.
Yeah.
And that's what gets us through life. And that starts right from the start of a baby's life.
So many parents raise their children based on how they were raised. So how can we kind of break the cycle of punitive discipline passed down through generations?
That is such an important question. And I know that, a lot of parents that I've worked with have felt kind of, uh, like it's hopeless or something to change that and to change the relationship that they're building with their child. But I am a developmentalist, which means that I think of everything in terms of change. We're constantly changing, we're constantly growing, we're constantly learning. If we remain, stuck where we were when we were 5 or 8 or 10 years old, that's not true of any part of ourselves. We change all the time, and we can keep changing. Like we can definitely do that. However, it's not easy. So it's going to be a lot easier for a child raised without punishment, raised with communication and, you know, calm and gentle
Yeah.
kind of interaction to replicate that when they're parents because they've had it modeled for them, they've felt it, they've internalized it. A parent who was raised with violence is going to have a harder time
Mhm.
overcoming that. But we also know from research that those parents want to. They really want to do it differently, but often feel like it's internalized in them. It's like a script that they've been given, and it is. But that can be changed. It takes effort and it takes learning and it takes a real commitment, but it can certainly be done. But we need to really support parents. I think something that is really missing, both in your country and mine,
Yeah.
is a real dedicated system of support for parents. We kind of expect them to just figure it out. And that's that's a tall order for
Yeah.
any parent. I mean, I'm a developmental psychologist. I had a child, at a relatively advanced age,
Yeah.
you could
Uh-huh.
say, and I have a stable life and a stable marriage, and it was difficult. And like, I've got everything I need. So, and I have a history of a childhood that didn't have violence,
Mhm.
and it's difficult, and our countries, our governments don't recognize that. We expect that everybody can just do it, and that everybody's coming to it with a history and with skills and with knowledge that will just they'll sail through it. And then when something goes wrong, we punish the parents, and it's just such an unfair system.
Yeah.
So, I think what we all need to be calling for is support. So that's what I do, what I do.
Yeah.
And, it's in some ways it's difficult because we're just a small organization trying to help support parents across Canada and other places. But, again, it's kind of left up to us. There isn't anything at the government level that is making programs like ours accessible. So we try to make it as accessible as possible. It's for all parents. It's free. It's in local
Yeah.
communities. We're trying to, embed it in local communities so that parents anywhere can get it. But that's really hard to
Yeah.
do. So why isn't this a priority? It's It's about societal health. It's about preventing trauma. It's about preventing violence against children. Because that's another element of corporal punishment that I haven't talked about yet, is how it escalates. That we're really placing children at risk and parents at risk by sort of having a laissez-faire attitude toward hitting. Is
Yeah.
what happens when a parent hits a child is that they're expecting that that's going to actually work. That's going to get the outcome they want. And sometimes it does, but sometimes that child will resist. Because, when somebody's coming at us, a natural reaction is to push back. And that doesn't go over well with a parent who's in that state. They feel threatened and they feel disrespected. That's the defiance thing, right?
Yeah.
You, even when I hit you, you're not obeying. And they've started hitting. So now the stakes are really high. They're not going to, at that point, say, oh, okay, then maybe the hitting isn't working. I'll try something else.
Yeah.
Well, they're in a highly activated state. They're frustrated, they're angry, and they're making this attribution. This child is defying my authority. The most likely thing that's going to happen is they're going to hit harder.
Yeah.
And that child might resist harder. And you know where that goes? In a matter of seconds, that child's being beaten.
Yeah.
So when we say, it's okay, hitting is no big deal, spanking is no big deal, we are placing children and parents at risk. We're putting that message in the parent's head that it's okay to hit. So they're more likely to hit. When we say that things are not allowed or, just don't do it, it helps us inhibit that impulse.
Mhm.
So, we need to do whatever we can do to help, but not just by saying that, the parent's bad now
Yeah.
or the parent should be punished. All you're doing is repeating the same
Same thing.
nonsensical
Oh, yeah.
response. It's all about creating safety. We need to have an environment where parents feel safe to say, I'm having trouble.
Mhm.
I'm hitting, I want to stop, and not feel afraid. They need to know they're going to get the support, the respect, the dignity, and the knowledge that they need, just like children need. It's a human need.
Yeah.
Every human, regardless of height,
Yeah.
needs the same things.
Mhm. You've established this program in many different countries. However, in many these cultures, corporal punishment is normalized. So, how can advocates encourage change without alienating cultures and communities?
Yeah, that's very interesting because every culture thinks it's theirs.
Right.
Every, including Canada and the US.
Yeah.
Although I would say it's changed a lot in the Canada and the US over the last
Yeah.
couple of decades. That's changed a lot. But when I was a child, oh my goodness, children were hit in public all the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't something you could question. There was no, it was just accepted and normalized. I mean, I grew up with a leather strap in my school, terrified of it.
Yeah.
A lot of kids in the US are going to schools with wooden paddles in them today
Oh,
and
yeah.
being paddled.
Yeah.
So there's been change, but it's not gone. But because we've seen change in our countries, we know we can see change anywhere. And yeah, every country thinks it's their tradition. And as a tradition, then it's a valuable thing. But there are traditions and there are uh, values. So,
Yeah.
some things are just done because they've always been done.
Mhm.
So, we can look at a lot of things around the world, including in our own countries. Let's look at hazing, for
Yeah.
example. Let's
Yeah.
look at bullying. It's always been done.
Yeah.
You know, let's look at, in my country, hitting kids with leather straps in school.
Yeah.
It's just done. But that's not a value. Hurting, inflicting pain is not a value that we want to perpetuate. That's something that makes us feel proud of our culture. That's something we want to hand down to the next generation. Right? It's not something that promotes our culture, that promotes our the health of our children and our families. It's so we've seen it declining all around the world. And something too that you might be interested to know is that your country and mine are among the laggards
Yeah.
in this change. So
Mhm.
there are now 67, I believe, countries that have laws that say no child can be hit by
Yeah.
anybody, anywhere, anytime,
Yeah.
against the law.
In the US, there's still 17 states that allow corporal punishment, like even till the day. Yeah.
In schools. Yeah. It's allowed everywhere in the home
Yeah.
in US and Canada. And I think, a lot of Canadians are surprised
Yeah.
by that.
Yeah.
And a lot of Americans are even more surprised by
Yeah.
that
'Cause,
because
yeah,
they think,
we
yeah,
view
it's so
Canadians as
different.
like the nicest people. Yeah.
They're
It's
also
shocking to see.
nice.
Yeah.
But
Instead
we
of
have,
surprise that corporal punishment is still legal in Canada. Yeah.
it's still legal in Canada in the home.
In
Yeah.
home
It's
as well.
not allowed in schools, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's
In
still
home.
allowed in the home. And yeah, it's something. So when you look at countries around the world on every continent but North America,
Yeah. Hmm.
well, Antarctica, I suppose,
Exactly.
but Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, well, Australia still has corporal punishment. New Zealand is prohibited. So, 67 countries. It's a
Yeah.
lot of countries. And what that represents is that those governments kind of came to terms with it and said,
Yeah.
the research is like, it's not even a debate in any
Yeah.
way anymore. The pile of research showing
Oh,
negative outcomes is like
oh,
this, and the
exactly.
pile showing positive outcomes doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, so, it's just like children and seatbelts. Like it's
Yeah.
unarguable now. And what also the governments have realized is that the country doesn't go to hell in a handbasket when they do this, because what it generally does is it launch that support that parents need. It makes the government realize, oh my goodness, we allowed this?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to stop that. But we
Yeah.
realize parents are going to need help. If they're still doing this, we need it's our responsibility to help this change be successful. And they
Yeah.
launch these fantastic public education campaigns and support. Again, in was it in Wales that the government, when they prohibited corporal punishment, they launched these like kind of parent family caravans that
Yeah.
would travel around the country, and they'd go to farmers markets and they'd go to community centers and community gatherings and just provide information and let parents know where they can go for support and hand out stuff and just let them know this isn't happening to punish you. This isn't something to be afraid of. This is our opportunity to change our culture. Let's do it together. And that's generally what's happened in all of these countries.
In a research article, actually, you wrote a generation without spanking, without smacking, the impact of Sweden's ban. Sweden was actually the first country to ban corporal punishment in 1979. So, what made that possible politically and also culturally at that time?
It's so interesting. When I learned about that law, I was a new professor and I read about it in a textbook, but there was no explanation. It's just like one sentence. And I thought, what? How did they do that? And, was this some authoritarian thing where the government was telling them how to raise their children? Or was
Yeah.
this a grassroots thing? Or like, what? What? How did this happen? Because that was the first I'd ever heard of such a thing. And so I got a grant and I went there and I interviewed all kinds of people to find out how this came about, why it came about, and what the impacts have been. So first of all, it happened in the International Year of the Child. So in those International Year of,
With the
um,
United Nations, right? That was the UN convention, I believe. Or
well, it was actually 10 years before the UN
oh,
convention. Yeah,
wow.
but
Well, four.
yeah,
Okay.
the convention was adopted in 1989, but it was that year that started that process.
Yeah.
So in 1979, countries are saying, what are we going to do to make things better in our country for children? And this is one of the things Sweden did. And the same year, Poland actually introduced
Okay.
the first draft of a convention on the rights of the child. And for the next 10 years, countries all debated and everything. And then
Yeah.
they came to agreement and they adopted it in 1989. But Sweden already had this idea of children being full human beings with fundamental rights, like
Yeah.
the right to be safe,
Yeah.
and so that wasn't a new idea in Sweden. But it's important to know that in the 50s,
Mhm.
every child in Sweden was hit. There was corporal punishment in the schools. It was very common in homes, and a significant proportion were beaten.
Yeah.
And so, they changed.
Yeah.
They changed, but it was because they were the first to pass this law. There's a long history,
Mhm.
but one of the things that contributed to it was the fact that they had thought their law was clear and that children couldn't be hit. But then two children were badly beaten by their parents, and the judges in those cases said, well, they're just doing their parental duty. They're within their parental rights. And what was interesting is that those two cases of bruising, not killing, bruising, got created such an outcry that the population demanded something be done about this, that
Yeah.
no judge should ever be able to make a ruling like that again. Imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
And so this was in, the late 70s. And so the government struck a commission on children's rights, a
Yeah.
concept that hadn't certainly touched Canada at that point or
Yeah.
many other places. And they looked at the civil code, not the criminal code, but the civil code
Mhm.
that kind of gives guidelines and regulations for things like foster care and adoption and relationships between parents and children.
Yeah.
And they suggested that a law be put into that code that was really clear, that said, but here's what it said. This is what I find this fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Our law in Canada is in the criminal code that says every parent is justified by using force by way of correction that's reasonable under the circumstances. That's been interpreted in
Mhm.
incredible ways of,
Yeah.
well, horrible. So it's all, what is the parent or the adult justified in doing to a child, which means it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Sweden's law, they got rid of that in the criminal code. They got that out of there in 1957.
Mhm.
Then in 1979, they put this new law into the civil code. So it's not a crime. It's a regulation that says children are entitled to care, security, and a good upbringing. Children are entitled to a certain standard of care,
Yeah.
which includes not being hurt by the people who are supposed to be caring for them. And so corporal punishment and other humiliating treatment
Yeah.
were not allowed, which is very interesting wording because what it says is that physical punishment is also humiliating.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it also included other things that degrade or, like emotional kinds of things that harm children psychologically. So, and this law was passed unanimously by the parliament. I think there might have been two MPs that didn't vote for it.
Yeah.
And it just, nobody really thought twice
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It was, and now today, all these years later, no one would ever think of changing that.
Mhm.
It would probably be the last thing that would be changed in
Yeah.
their legal system because what they've now done is completely switch that around. What's the parents got the right to hit this child. They switched it around. This child has a right to be safe in their home. It's a very different way of thinking, a very different way of making law,
Yeah.
but the whole society agrees.
Yeah.
Of course.
I love how you brought up the bruising, like that caused like a really big public outcry because it kind of shows like the slippery slope. Because also in Texas, it says that corporal punishment is acceptable if used reasonable force. But like, what
Mhm.
is reasonable force, right? Because it could cause like a slippery slope, as you said, from just like disciplining your child to child abuse, or like causing bruises and causing the child to bleed. So I love how you like kind of brought up that point.
Yeah.
For my final question is, if you could speak directly to every parent, teacher, or policymaker in the world, what would you want them to understand about children discipline, and what kind of world we're shaping through positive parenting?
That is some question. Wow, would I love that opportunity? I think we need to think about the kind of world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world where the only way we can resolve conflict is by killing each other, which is what's happening
Yeah,
all over the world,
yeah,
where people who have frustrations are driving cars into crowds, where kids who are frustrated and don't know what to do with that are going in and shooting up schools, where countries are bombing and
oh yeah,
destroying each other and killing innocent civilians by the thousands. What is wrong with what we're doing? We're teaching that violence is a solution to conflict. And if we ever want to have a peaceful world, if we ever want to end violence against women, against men, against children, against school children, we've got to teach them how to live in this world in a way that is with empathy, with communication, with listening, with skills in resolving conflict without violence. And when we're teaching them from the youngest age that violence is right, that it's okay, it doesn't hurt you, it hurts me more than it hurts you. No, it doesn't. It hurts that child far more than it hurts you, and it hurts their skills going forward in life, in solving conflict with others. It hurts their bodies, it hurts their souls, and it's creating damage that we see later on down the road. I mean, I'm not saying that every school shooter was physically punished. That's not the case. But it's not helping. It's in the air. It's in the air we breathe that violence is the solution. And that other people, we don't have empathy for other people. And the more we hit children when they're young, the more we're contributing to that problem. We're contributing to it. And so if we want to stop that, we can each do our part. We can each do our part by creating a home in which people understand, listen, respect each other's point of view, and try to find solutions together. And we can do that very early on. I can end with one little episode in which my little guy, when he was about 3, his caregiver took him to the mall, opened the car door, and he took off. And
yeah,
he ran into the parking lot. She was so shaken. She was so afraid. She was panicked. And she told me, I can never take him shopping again. That's it. And so she went into that part of her brain that said, punish, shut down, control, control, and so I talked to him and said, here's what happened. And here's why she felt like she did, and talked to him about fear and about, how drivers can't see him and etc. Tried to help him understand her point of view, and then said, what do you think would help? Because he said, I'm so excited. I see the store and I'm so excited. There's toys in the window and I just want to get there. And of course, he's 3 years old. He doesn't know anything about traffic and driving and, what you can see through a windshield and all that. So we talked it all through and he started to understand. And he said, maybe if she put something in my hand that I could focus on, this is a 3-year-old, I could stop myself from running. So I said to her, can we, he thinks this could work. Could we try this? She said, yes, let's try it. And did it. And it worked because he knew because we talked through, we talked and talked, tried to figure out what's going on inside of you, what's going on inside of her, what's going on in that parking lot. He knew it was an impulse. He couldn't put words to that, but he knew it was an impulsive thing. So if he knew that if he had something, he could regulate that impulse. Couldn't put words to that, couldn't explain it, but he knew that would help. And it did. And he got to go shopping.
Yeah.
And he had the experience of solving the problem. And so, instead of growing up with, I'm going to spank you for that, that's the solution, that nothing is learned.
Mhm.
Nothing is gained except you, the person I love and trust most in the world, will hurt me, and I don't really know why. So,
Thank
if we want to end violence, this is where it begins. This is the seed that sprouts. And it also is the seed that sprouts peaceful conflict resolution. But doesn't mean we don't need a lot of help getting there. It's not easy, but we can do it.
Thank you so much for your time. It's such an honor to speak with you. And to everyone watching, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.